The paper I will present in this year's Lacea conference is titled No Reversal of Fortune in the Long Run, Geography and Spatial Persistence of Prosperity in Colombia. And this paper arises from the debate of whether has been a reversal of fortune since the 16th century among the countries colonized by the Europeans. In the work of Acemoglu and Robinson, they have argued that there was a reversal of fortune among countries colonized by the Europeans in the 16th century, in the sense that the regions that correspond to the countries that are now poorest were the most prosperous ones in the 16th century. And this they present as an argument for the importance of institutions, because if there was a reversal of fortune and the regions that were most prosperous in the 16th century are now the poorest, it cannot be argued that geography is a very important determinant in the long run of relative economic prosperity. And there has been many criticisms to this argument by Acemoglu and Robinson, and there are many papers controverting their empirical evidence. The paper I am presenting is related to this literature, but looks specifically at the reversal of fortune within one country. And there's also a recent literature for India and for the New World looking at this evidence. One of the problems I see with this literature that looks at this topic is that it only takes two observations: the initial relative prosperity and the final relative prosperity. And the main problem is that the quality of the initial observation, of the data for the initial observation, is very deficient. So if you have only one observation, which is very deficient, the results are not so quite robust. What I do in this paper is that I don't look at only two observations, but I look at the whole spectrum of the period, using all the national censuses available for Colombia, which are a total of 17 since the early 19th century, plus a very complete population count that was conducted in the early 16th century, just a few years after the Spanish conquest. So I believe that it reflects fairly well the population density before the arrival of the Spaniards. Why do I speak about the population density? Because this debate on relative prosperity has, because we don't have information of GNP per capita for this period, has to use different proxies. And the most popular proxies for relative prosperity of the different regions analyzed in this literature are the degree of urbanization or the population density. And the one I have used is the population density. And what did the results show for Colombia? It shows that there has been a complete persistence of relative prosperity. The regions of Colombia that are now poorest were, by the population density index, also the poorest regions before the Spaniards came. And through time, that has changed very, very little. There has been, through time, there are some regions that have medium or term levels of relative prosperity, and they have declined in relative terms. But in the long run, the basic pattern remains the same. And this we can observe through the correlations between the different censuses and the correlations for both for the subnational level of observation, which is the departments in Colombia, and for the municipalities, which is the smallest entities for which we have population data, show correlations of more than point 0.9 through time, which is very clear pattern for this argument. The basic conclusions are that in Colombia, long-run economic prosperity has been fairly stable through time. And that in that initial distribution, geography was very important. This does not contradict the importance of institutions, because the type of institutions that were set up in the 16th century depended in part on geographic conditions. For example, the regions that had higher mortalities for the colonists or the conquerors, in the case of Colombia, did not attract as much European population, and so geography affected both in the number of immigrants that arrived to these places, and as a result, the type of institutions, whether more exploitative or more inclusive, that were set up. And this, for example, has been very well argued in the work of Kenneth Sokolov and Stanley Engerman. So, even if geography is very important at the beginning of the period, once institutions are created, institutions have a very significant persistence, and therefore they also play a very important role. Which is the most important for the different parts of a country? It's not a theoretical question, it's an empirical question that has to be evaluated in every case. But what is very clear is that the role of geography has not been insignificant for the pattern of long-term territorial prosperity in Colombia.